Welcome. My name's Doug Aberle and I'm the Chairman of the Centre for Engineering, Leadership and Management. And tonight is the second in one of our series called Engineering Frontiers. We came up with the idea about a year ago that it would be really useful, helpful and interesting if we were able to interview some of the engineering luminaries who've had outstanding careers and basically hear from them about a couple of things. One, how they got to where they are, and in particular what they see as the frontier or the edge, if you like, for up-and-coming engineering leaders to be focusing on going forward, what they envisage the future holding in terms of the direction for engineering. And tonight's the second in our series, and we're very fortunate to have Peter Meurs with us. He's kindly agreed to be interviewed. And the first one involved Erica Smythe, who confessed that she wasn't actually an engineer, but went on to give us some very useful insights anyway. And we have two more planned for later in the year. But thank you for joining us, and Peter, welcome. Thank you very much for giving up your time.
Good to be here.
By way of a little bit of introduction, I know most of you know Peter pretty well, and I often hear people say he needs no introduction. But I think it's polite to introduce anyway. So he actually comes with a real pedigree. Most of us, I think, first came to know him as part of Worley Parsons. But before that, as he'll share with us, he spent 7 years with ESSO. And more latterly, since 2010, he's been with FMG in charge of their development projects and some very substantial work that most of you would know of. And that's been quite a diverse career, and the learnings that Peter's picked up along the way we'll be hearing from him about. So thanks very much, Peter. Bachelor of Mechanical Engineering, member of the Institute of Company Directors, also on the board of FMG. I was wondering if we could begin by just you filling in some of the gaps in my little description of your life, at least up to that point, and perhaps mentioning some of the key people and impacts along the way.
One thing, I think I've made plenty of mistakes along the way, which have all led to learning, which is always good. I started life in Warrnambool, Victoria, grew up next to the Meurs, who ran the local car repair shop and did milking machines and those sort of things. So spent a lot of weekends building mini bikes and go-karts and using Victor engines and those sort of things as I grew up, and had a great time doing that. My grandfather was Fletcher Jones, the clothing Fletcher Jones, and came back from the First World War, and I don't know those who know the story, but he had a real vision for cooperatives and engaging employees in work and ownership, and also in striving for quality and lowering costs. So I kind of grew up with that, him sitting on the end of the bed telling me bedtime stories and things about life as running a hawker's wagon and then building a business, and that changed my life. While I did first year engineering and then spent 2 years as a Mormon missionary in New Zealand, and I guess I learnt some key lessons from that. One is how to deal with rejection, which happens pretty much all the time, and the second was...
It's just those Kiwis.
Yeah, and I guess the second thing was really the experience of living for other people and seeing lives change and kind of living for their success, and just how much joy there is in that. And so that probably was my best education, I think, of everything I've done, and I can see it's continued to bless me since then. I joined ESSO Australia in 1981 as a graduate with a wife and one daughter, and I think another one on the way. I remember how good it was to get the first paycheck after living on nothing for a couple of years, and went out and bought a lounge suite, which was much needed, but just had a great experience with ESSO.
And you worked in Bass Strait at that stage?
I did. My first job was installing a pipeline between West Kingfish and Kingfish A platform about 3.5 kilometres long in 80 metres of water. And it was a great job. I sort of joined as a project engineer working for a project manager that left after 3 months, and I inherited the job and sort of had boys' own fun with this, what was then quite a high-tech job. We used Artemis as a positioning system and acoustic transponders to track this pipe that we assembled at a beach site and then towed offshore, and had a deflect to connect technique and some just real exciting stuff for a young engineer. And we towed the pipeline offshore. I'll make it a brief story, but got offshore and it had to be perfectly aligned between the two platforms and for it to connect correctly. And we checked the alignment, we checked its positioning. It was in 1 metre of where it should be at the front end. Surveyed the back end of the pipeline, it was 36 metres out. And you know, the question was who measured this pipeline? And you know, I called the site, who measured it? And turned out one of the welders was the only known measurement of it, and right near the end we'd added 36 metres of, we had to change the weight coding on the end of the pipeline, and we'd added 36 metres without taking anything off. So I remember radioing into my boss, Jim Power, worked for Powers before, at ESSO, and saying, you know, what do I do? And he said, Meurs, just don't come in till it's connected. and a month offshore later, working on workboats, and I did get seasick in those days, we finally got it connected. Spent about $4 or $5 million more, and I got back to ESSO, sure that my career was over, and wrote a report where I identified all the mistakes that I'd made and sort of sought forgiveness and asked if I could do the next one. And surprisingly, ESSO agreed, and I did another 2 of these bottom throw pipelines, and the next 2 we made up most of the money and some more. So it turned out, and I think I learned a great lesson about taking responsibility with that job, that when things go wrong, you know, it's probably the greatest opportunity you have to say, I did that, and I caused the problem, and I'm also willing to try and fix it.
You mentioned when we were chatting beforehand that that was a seminal moment for you, and that approach of putting your hand up when you've made a mistake, and being, you talked a lot about being non-defensive. That obviously started from very early with that event.
Yeah, I think I learned about it from religion. I knew about repentance. So, yeah. You know, so the easy thing is to say I did it, but then get involved in the solution.
Right.
And it's you know, I've had many experiences, particularly later working at Worley Parsons, where we'd make mistakes, or someone would make a mistake, and they'll always happen. And the power of going to visit a customer and saying, you know, what have we done this time? And then they tell you all the problems, and you say, is there anything else? Don't, you know, just get out every problem you possibly can on the table. And if you do that for long enough, you end up sitting together solving the problem rather than trying to work out who caused it. And it's incredibly powerful and so simple. And it really applies to all of your life. You know, rather than say, it's your fault, or it's not our fault, and someone else, just get it all out, and the attitude changes. And so, you know, it's a powerful thing to do, and rare. It shouldn't be, but it is.
Well, it is rare, and in many ways you embody it, and I can remember that from dealing with you as a customer.
Because no doubt we made some mistakes.
Well, it mattered at the time, but we did forgive you.
Yeah, that's right.
No, that's true, and I think that's a really important insight. But that really takes us to Worley Parsons, and I'm sure a lot of people would be really interested in hearing your relationship with John Grill and how that came about, and in many respects very opposite people. The legend is that he paid his way through university playing poker, and you interrupted your university career to be a Mormon missionary. Not the 2 people you might have imagined would have got together to put their lives on the line and start a business. So can you tell us how that?
So sort of the second job I had at Worley Parsons was, at ESSO, was trying to work out how to strengthen platforms in Bass Strait, and that they've been designed to a Mexican standard, and when checked in calcareous soil, you know, needed to be strengthened. and I worked on that platform strengthening project, and Wallan Grill, John Grill, was one of the key consultants that helped us. And so we worked together, and while we were working together, I particularly liked John, and I told him about my aspiration to one day run my own business, and that I'd like to do that and have autonomy and responsibility. And about 7 years into Esso, he rang me one day and said, in 1987, and said, I've just bought Worley Engineering in Perth. I said, that's interesting. And he said, well, it's a shell company. It's actually gone broke. It hasn't had any employees for a year, but I bought the name, and would you be interested in being the general manager of this organisation? I'd like to form a process arm of Wallan Grill, and the Worley name would be a good name to do it. And
not too many HR issues.
No, that's right. So I thought that was really answering what I'd asked for, and we talked about it, and I loved working for Esso. It was just a great experience, and I was doing okay there, but this chance to sort of start something and apply principles I thought would be good in business was too good to be true. So we basically agreed. I wrote a business plan, 2 pages, that said we'll grow to 20 people, and we'd employ these people, and we work in oil and gas, and we agreed that he'd pay me for 2 years, and we weren't making money after that. That'd be it, and that I would pay him what he'd paid for the company to buy 10%, which is a typical John Grill type trade. So we did that, and we towed our caravan over to Perth, then with 3 little girls in tow, and I started knocking on doors in Perth in 1988 for about 3 months, and everyone told me that Worley Engineering was no good. We'd never get another job in oil and gas, and it's a waste of time. So that took me back to my Mormon missionary days. I'd heard all that before, and away we went. So I ended up, went to visit Alcara and said, look, we've had a illustrious career in oil and gas, and we could help you as well. And our first job was upgrading some steam piping at Pinjarra, which I did myself. And it was a great experience. But I remember in those days, and I couldn't afford to employ anyone, so I'd put an ad in the paper each weekend, and everyone that applied and anyone I liked, I'd basically say, look, I can't afford to employ you right now, but can I have your CV and can I use it as I'm tendering for jobs? And if they agreed to do that, so I had a virtual team of people, and away we went. And at the end of you have to do these things. And at the end of the first year, we had, I think, about 20 people. And
20 virtual people or 20?
No, real employees, and about 500 virtual ones by then. And into the second year, a couple of hundred, and it sort of went from there. But they were great. They were tough years, because and all of you that are working in small engineering companies providing services understand that concept, that you're living for the next job and always concerned about having work for your people and giving them enough challenge. But they're also great times to be very united and focused on quality and customer service and those sorts of things.
That detail about the beginning leads me to one of the other questions, which is about how do you sustain yourself? Because back then it would have been really stark. 3 small children, new state. Probably said to you, oh, this is going to be fantastic. Come with me. 2 years pay and a virtual team. But what I notice about you is that you've just got this relentlessly positive view of life, not only about showing up and owning up, as you described, but also about not accepting that things have to go badly. And I was wondering how you sustained yourself in those early years, because those principles are great. It really takes courage to be able to live them, and I'm thinking that's a lesson for everybody.
Yeah, well, one blessing is I have stayed active in church, and so when we moved to Perth, we had a sort of church family straight away, which is really, really a great thing. It really helps. and also know the power of prayer. So I spent a lot of time on my knees during those early days, praying for our customers. You know.
Please send them.
But I'd also, you know, just some basic things. Most people don't go back, you know, so it's a huge differentiator if you just go back and visit your customers. And I figured out that it takes 7 visits now before you can really say you've tried. And the first visit, now they absolutely don't want to see you. And the second visit, they're trying to remember if they've seen you before. And then the third visit, it's kind of, you know, there's some kind of rapport starting to happen. And then each time you go, you have to go and offer something and, you know, add some value in some way and try to do that. But by the 4th or 5th visit, you've become either a nuisance or, you know, a friend of some kind. And by the 6th or 7th, you find that there's opportunities to do things and work together. And the great thing is that most of your competitors only visit once, and so, you know, you've got it in straight away. And just helping, I kind of understood that concept from my missionary days again, but it's a really powerful one. And the second thing is that, you know, you have to add value. So there's whatever you're doing, whether you're working for a company or providing services to other companies, you're only there because you make a difference and add value. And just painting the vision of that for people working in Worley Parsons and understanding the concept that we could never relax. Whatever we were doing, you had to go to another step. You had to find the next solution, the next best way of contracting, or you weren't going to stay in business. You know, no one wants what they had before. And so that continues to drive me now. You know, we've just finished a massive project, and to me it was great, but we're saying we're totally dissatisfied with that. There's so many things that we could have done better, and we've got to learn from that and go forward and apply those next time. And, you know, I can walk past so many things in that $100 million, $9 billion project and say, next time we're going to do it that way. And I think that's, you know, that's a blessing.
That's actually part of the fun for you.
It's really fun. Yeah, it's great. Being able to face the fact that it's not perfect and it could be better. And trying to get other people to think that way too, all of our customers, suppliers, contractors. You know, if they'll get into that mode, you can just do so much more than saying we know how to do it and we'll do it that old way again.
And knowing that that you can always find something more, having that expectation is quite energising, I'm imagining.
It is.
Yeah. And so that takes us to what you're doing now with FMG, which was another major shift.
Well, let me just, one little last thing from Worley Parsons. One great thing for us was we were going along, you know, growing at about 60, 80%, 100% a year sometimes. We ran out of cash completely because, you know, when you're trying to fund growth in a services business, you've got to fund the next 2 months' payroll. And, you know, we used to ring around and I'd ring all the contractors and say, well, we can pay you next month. And even some of the staff and all those sorts of things. But we ran out of mortgages and goodwill of our people to the point that we couldn't expand anymore. Australian banks wouldn't look at us. And we went to the Hong Kong bank and they lent us money against our debtors. And that's how we funded, you know, that continual growth. We had great debtors, but, and of course later on the Australian banks came back and said, we'd love to help you. But that was one thing. The second thing we did in about 1993, about 5 years in, we took on an advisory board. And the advisory board had a banker and a taxation specialist and a strategist and a guy from Macquarie. And they met with us as an advisory board. We were a private company and just told us how crap we were. You know, we thought we were fantastic. We were growing fast. And they told us all the things that were going to make us trip up from their much broader business perspective. And it was very tough to take, but it was incredibly valuable. And it showed me the power of making sure that you've got, you know, more perspectives than yours, sort of the pure engineering perspective. But if you want to be in business, there's a lot more to understand than what we sometimes see as an engineer. And they were great years learning from that team, putting up with their criticism when they said that our finance system was going to fall over and we needed this kind of talent here and there. And they helped us prepare ultimately to float and grow and go the next step.
But it takes a certain amount of humility and grace, really, to actually take on that advice. It's rare, I think, for people to be able to do that.
Well, it was great, and the other thing that they led us to do was to have an annual strategy session, true strategy, that didn't have anything to do with our day-to-day business. So the strategy session would be what's happening in the world, what part could we, where's the biggest need, and then could we play a part in that? And that led to concepts like we brought alliancing to Australia effectively, and in 1994, and won a couple of small ones, and then went after the Woodside one against all odds, all international competitors, and won it. And then had no idea how we were going to do it. It was just a disaster. Thankfully, Woodside were very, very kind to us and let us grow into it. But that was, and that went on to be half of our business around the world. And that was all strategic. And then all the growth in Worley Parsons, all the acquisitions, and which we always called mergers, were all related to identifying a need somewhere in the world and then finding a company that related to that we could work with, and then growing into it. So, so that kind of concept of making sure that every now and again, whatever business you're in, you have a serious, not day-to-day business strategy session with a lot of outside help, a lot of outside input, so you're not just doing your own thing, to seriously challenge, what opportunities are out there. And John Grill really has the ability to listen, and in those sort of events as well. And he built a team around him that were absolutely prepared to embrace new and challenging things. So,
including you.
Yeah, including me, yes, which was a huge challenge, I'm sure.
Well, you demonstrate the same capacity to listen as you've been talking, so that makes sense. So just talk a little bit, if you would, about you and he. I mean, you obviously trusted him, or you wouldn't have stepped into that space. One
of the things, just after joining, I was reviewing a budget with John, and he was giving me a lot of advice and help. And I said to him, John, you've got to understand that I wanted to run my own business. And I don't, I'll listen to your advice, but I've got to be able to make the calls. And he honoured that. For the whole time I was at Worley Parsons, it was fantastic that he would, in one of the ways that Worley Parsons was structured is that it had lots of business managers throughout the business that were totally empowered. So within a set of risk guidelines, you could run your own part of Worley Parsons. You could employ who you wanted to, you could run, you could sign contracts, do whatever you like, providing it was reimbursable work within a certain risk parameter. And if you wanted to take on lump sum risk or something else, you got lots of help. And that was a pattern that
it was help in inverted commas, right? Yeah,
and it really was, the responsibility of those businesses was to really know your local customers and look after them and draw on the strength of the overall company to support them. And again, it was a highly differentiated model. So I could go in Perth, we grew to 3,000 people, and I could go in to a contract negotiation, make the decisions on the spot, sign the contract, while all of our competitors then were going back to Houston or London or somewhere else to get advice. And their advice had come back and I had the contract. It was terrific. Or we had the contract, I shouldn't say I had.
Well, it probably was you. So that again is really formative for you. The jump that you made to FMG, quite a different role in many respects. Tell us a bit about what attracted you to do that, because you'd really reached the pinnacle of success in many ways with Worley Parsons by that stage.
So I'd been with Worley Parsons for 23 years when I joined Fortescue in 2010. But the last couple of years I've been the sponsor for Fortescue's T45 project, the original Fortescue project, the port, rail and mine. And got to know Andrew Forrest, and we were kind of joint sponsors together. And what I loved the principles that Andrew espoused, the sort of never give up, innovation, a different approach to contracting. And when we had problems and challenges, and if you work with Andrew, you'll have plenty, he would just have this focus on find a solution. And what I loved about that was, for Andrew, probably, I was a big seller of EPCM, or we were, and it's a great way to do business, but I'd noticed that when we had problems, we'd be identifying what the problem was and finding the solution and then saying, this is what it's going to cost to solve the problem, and this is how much longer it's going to take, and that'd be what you did. And getting to know Andrew, I realised that that was kind of documenting failure as far as he was concerned. Now, when you have a problem with Andrew, you explain the problem in great detail, and he listens attentively, and then we'll say something like, but that doesn't make any difference, does it? It's not going to cost any more or take any longer. And you say, but you don't understand, Andrew. This, I've just told you all that, we just had a flood and lost this and this broke. But you say, but that's what we're here for. That's our job. You're an engineer. Solve the problem. And after a while, you realise he's serious. That's what you've got to do. And it's amazing that you say that enough and talk to the team enough, and everyone gets into that mindset. And 99.9% of the time, you can actually find a solution. And unlike the solutions that we've kind of learnt with engineers, you never change the scope or you never change the method. You actually have to. You've got to say, I've got to achieve the outcome, but I'm going to have to do it quite differently to achieve that outcome. And that's a powerful thing, and we seem to have lost that as engineers. And so I really like that. I like that concept.
It's almost as if it reawakened something that you'd always known.
And so, Andrew eventually convinced me that I shouldn't retire, I should come and have some fun in Fortescue, and joined in 2010 and took on this. 6 months later, we announced the $8.4 billion, 100 million tonne expansion project. And interestingly, the very first thing we did after announcing that and being totally bagged by all of our competitors in the industry saying, you're smoking something, you're 30% under budget and in half the time that you should be. The first thing we did is jumped on a plane, in fact Andrew's jet, which he'd just acquired, and visited pretty much every vendor and supplier that could help provide equipment for the project, met at CEO or chairman level, and shared with them our project and said, we've done a pre-feasibility study for this and this is what we'd like to do, but you've been in this business for years, how would you do it? And suppliers and vendors said, no one has ever said that to us. No one's ever come to see us and talk to us before they started developing their project. And of course we can help you, and within a couple of months, we had responses from all of these companies, from the US, from Europe, from China. And within 3 months, we'd spent $1.6 billion on all the equipment, all the facilities for the project, based on what these vendors had told us. And then in May in 2011, we went back to visit all of them after placing the orders and said, we've now placed the order. You've committed to deliver to us and help us to be successful, and we're going to hold you to it. We've got your number, Chairman or CEO. We weren't meeting at procurement level, we're meeting at that level, and we expect you to deliver. And now again, they said, no one ever does this, but of course we'll help you. And we did have to make a few phone calls during the project, quite a few, but we had their attention. And that just seems so obvious now. But we kind of lost that. We started off in an engineering office with writing specs to vendors and suppliers that have been doing it forever, send it out, ask them to comply with what we're telling them to do, even if they think it's rubbish. We reject them if they don't agree. It's backwards.
Yeah.
And so to me, a light's gone on that this is a whole new way of thinking. Why aren't we all thinking like that and engaging people and helping us?
That had started to occur to you at Worley Parsons, though,
It had.
hadn't it? I mean, and you saw Andrew as somebody, as a client who actually acted the way you wished your clients would.
And already had a belief that this could work before joining Andrew, but he just provided the ideal opportunity, or Fortescue did, to really take that to the nth degree. Yeah. And of course, we also did it with contractors. So engaging with our contractors, we tried to do the same thing. And how would you do it? How can you help us? This is what we're trying to achieve. We tried to understand their risk, to say, rather than us just write a contract, give you our standard contract, let's talk about what risk you can take, what risk we can take, how can we make this contractually work for you so you can deliver. And again, it's a obvious way of thinking, but we want to have lawyers write contracts that tie the poor contractor up in knots and give them risks that they can't afford to take, and then wonder why it costs so much.
Yeah. And a friend of mine says the obvious is often despised. It's a good example. How many contractors responded really positively to that when you first went to them? Because I'm imagining it was a bit different and unusual and a bit scary, paradoxically.
Yes. I think we had, from a vendor perspective, when we went to visit all the vendors, the US vendors were the most creative. They really came back with some fantastic offers, ideas and concepts, and it was very impressive to see that, and the sort of maturity of thinking and other things, and it was quite surprising as well. And so we ended up buying a lot of equipment from the US, and then Europe was behind that. And Europe, some of the European vendors were also magnificent in what they offered, and China was the least able to cope with that kind of thinking, so show us respect sort of thing. But we ended up buying a lot of gear from China too, but it just sort of showed the maturity of thinking in those parts of the world. And from contractors, it took some contractors quite a while to understand that our expectation was, as we were working with them as well, was that we were going to succeed together. So we'd notice, and we used a lot of what, I don't want to be derogatory, but you'd call second-tier contractors. So we used a lot of contractors where the work we gave them was probably a third bigger than anything they'd ever done before. And we were going to help them to achieve this result. But because this was the biggest job they'd ever done, of course, we were their most important customer and got all the attention that we wanted. And once they got onto that and realised that we were going to help, we achieved some incredible things, just amazing transformations in some of our contractors. And
there must have been some lived examples for them of actually being helped to get them over that shift from, can this possibly be true, can we trust these guys, to, oh yeah, we can. There are a couple of examples of that.
Yeah, so several. One was we had on our rail line going from the main line, which comes down from Port Hedland to the Chichesters, we put a 130-kilometre spur line out to Solomon. And it went through the Chichester Ranges, which is incredibly difficult country. It's tiger country, it's hard rock. And we used 4 contractors to do the earthworks. And one contractor, I guess I can mention the name, McMahon's, had the largest section through the Chichester Ranges. And after, I think, 2.5, 3 months of blasting and digging, they hadn't found any suitable material. They'd actually moved dirt, and they were paid by the tonne of suitable material. So, they were just dying.
Bleeding, yeah.
And it was clear to us that they couldn't achieve the schedule. And so we met with them and said, look, you can't achieve the schedule here, but the schedule has to be met. And we talked to them about taking a third of the scope off them and gave it to another contractor. And it was really tough at the time, but we said, look, McMahon's, we absolutely want you to be successful, and we're going to help you with this, and we are going to make this change because we have to achieve the schedule. And it turned out that was a very successful project for them. They delivered on time, they made money, and so did the second contractor that we introduced. And it was a case of we had to do something. And rather than just sit and let the outcome be a disaster, and it would have been for them and us, we went through the pain of working out another solution, changing strategy. So that's one example. The other example is probably with RCR Tomlinson, who did the Firetail and then the King's ore processing plants at Solomon. And Firetail, these were very big projects for RCR. And we had lots of struggles with Firetail, getting it finished. But we stuck with RCR and said, look, let's take all the learnings we've had here and apply them to King's. And the King's project was deferred by 6 months because the ore price dropped in September 2012. So we restarted it, and in May 2013, the first big modules started arriving on site. And this is a massive plant. It's a 40 million tonne iron ore plant, full wet plant. In November, the plant was completed. And it was just, it's probably 4 times faster than anything of that size has ever been built. And RCR, the whole team from top to bottom were engaged in that. All of the tradesmen, superintendents, supervisors. It was just an incredibly successful job. And they got it. They actually got the whole team engaged and made it happen.
They obviously felt very supported by you.
They did, yeah. Probably driven by us a little bit, supported as well.
Well, but as you've pointed out, just driven in the end doesn't really work.
No,
it just drives people into the ground. So, yeah,
it's just
a couple of really good examples. Before I invite other people who might have some questions that they're interested to put to you, reflections on where you see the focus going for people in engineering leadership. In Australia in particular, I know you've got a bit of a passion about not accepting that things happen, like a bit of the Andrew Forrest, yes, but this is when it's got to be done. Interested in your reflections on what people in engineering leadership positions can and need to do going forward, and what younger engineers coming up through the ranks need to be focusing on to prepare themselves for the future as you see it. Can you reflect a bit on it?
Yeah, great. I think there's 2 sort of themes for me. One is that I really do believe we're moving into a electricity age. So I drive a Holden Volt now, and I've just ordered a Tesla. So, it sort of shows my bent a little bit. It's fantastic driving an electric car. I mean, you get heaps more power, silence, performance.
Constant torque across the whole range.
Yeah, constant torque from the beginning. I mean, the Tesla's 4.2 seconds to 100 kilometres, and it's a 4-door sedan. So I'm looking forward to that. And you sit there completely silent, the lights, and then just disappear.
Making a leap to hyperspace.
But we really are going to see a massive transition in how electricity is generated, how it's used, with distributed power. I mean, it really is a different world, and I think as engineers, that's a very exciting opportunity. And the other massive opportunity from Australia is just the emergence of Asia. I mean, Asia is going to have, it's predicted, another 2 billion people in middle class by 2050. I mean, that is an enormous opportunity when you think of all of the infrastructure, all of the stuff that has to happen, and that's a reasonably conservative estimate of the change that's going to occur. So we live in the centre of the fastest changing piece of the world, and we simply have to be part of it. I think engineers, we should enjoy that.
Well, particularly if you combine both of those ideas, because
it's a massive opportunity.
You said to me a couple of years ago, when the first of the automotive plants was shutting down, why aren't we building electric cars? Why aren't we converting them? This is coming. That's clearly reflective of
I did have a crack at it. I actually invested in a company called Blade Electric Vehicles in Castlemaine and drove a couple of their cars with quite a few breakdowns and challenges as well. But I did have a go at it, but it was reasonably challenging. But seeing Tesla, what they've done in terms of the dream and then the automation they've applied and the technology they've developed is really quite remarkable, and I just see that taking off, absolutely.
So you're talking about where you think technology focus is going, and also where you think the demand is going to be. If I'm a young engineer, maybe 30, looking at the rest of my career. What kind of things would you recommend I focused on? And I'm happy to think about whether it's personal skills or whether it's technological skills.
Well, I think, be passionate for a start, and if you're not excited and driven by your job, then do something else, because there's no point showing up to work.
Not excited.
I mean, just enjoy it and get involved. Take the risks and take the opportunities when they come. That Worley Parsons opportunity for me, I was a young, inexperienced, I was 30, and suddenly in Perth knocking on doors and wondering if I was totally crazy after 3 months, not getting any work. But it's those things that make you. So take those opportunities and look for them. I think, my dad told me that many different things. He was a Dutchman and a great businessman. But he said, if you'll deliver far more value and actually work harder than you're paid for, one day you'll be paid far more than you can earn. And I really believe that. It's
Turned out to be true.
And I don't mean you've got to work long hours. I just mean you've got to add value. So challenge the status quo. Look for the opportunities. Seek them. Whoever you're working for, and be the champion of change. I mean, we simply can't accept the way we're doing it today. Can't be better. It's improvement, change, welcome it. And probably the other thing is get involved in the data age. We simply aren't going to be recording information on drawings, in folders, in cabinets in the future. Information must be stored with the object. And so, the whole concept of numbering systems and complex ways of handling data, the only place to keep it is with the object and have the object identified by its GIS or GPS location. And you can't go wrong. So keep the photographs, keep the design, keep the, all the things that happen, the maintenance schedules, everything else with the object, and it'll always be accessible to everyone. And now we're getting there, but it's slow going because of engineers, unfortunately, who, had their heads set on the line thickness on the border around the. No, I'm being critical there, but we're just not. We're just stuck in our procedures and processes, and we've just got to get out of that thinking. It's just Google has shown us there's a whole new world of data, and we've got to live that way.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
that makes sense. But the other piece is to support that, people need to actually function differently between each other.
Yes.
But the way they actually relate to each other is different. You've talked about getting a different mindset, and they make sense. The other thing that's different is the level of connection. I mean, we all know the joke about the extroverted engineer being the one who looks at your shoes when he's talking to you. But to make what... Maybe you don't, oh, there you are. But to make what you're talking about work, there's an element of connectivity that's actually woven through everything you've been talking about in terms of the nature of relationship, whether it's contracting or connecting collegiately to make things happen. And it seems to me there needs to be a shift in expectation and capability.
Well, a fundamental thing for me is the most important thing you can do is help the people you're working with to be successful. It's, it sounds obvious, but if your entire focus is that, and you're not looking to prove that you're able to do anything, but you're just saying, that's my job, is to make the people around me successful, and include in that network your contractors, vendors, customers. That's your job. I mean, certainly as a Worley Parsons service provider, that was absolutely our job. Didn't matter how competent or incompetent your customer was, if you helped them to be successful, fill in the gaps that they had, help them, you can't help but be successful yourself. It seems pretty obvious.
It does, but it involves projecting yourself into their space and putting their well-being first.
Understanding what they need and also what they can do. And probably the second thing there is that some of the most valuable people in your network are also the most difficult. And don't expect that because someone is challenging to communicate with or something else, that they can't add incredible value. So don't look for people like you know, that you get on with well and everything else. And so some of the toughest characters I've had to deal with have been just so good at the thing they're good at that it's worth putting up with the rest. And Andrew Forrest is one of them.
Well, I was going to ask you about that.
I mean, what I say to Andrew is, you know, Andrew, it is worth listening to you because 1 in 10 things that you say is so valuable that we can kind of tolerate the other 9 crazy ideas. And you know, we have a laugh about that. But
well, you're in a luxurious position of being able to get away with that. Most of us would envy you. The other element about working with Andrew Forrest is he's very passionate about the community and giving back and contributing. And I know that resonates also with you. I just wondered if you'd like to comment a bit on that as well, because that seems to flavour not just thinking about making it better for the customer, but you seem to think about making it better for everybody.
Yeah, so I have one of my weekend jobs. I'm currently a leader in the church, and I have a position called an Area 70, and the assignment crosses the Pacific. So I'm away about 20 weekends a year visiting, you know, parts of Australia and New Zealand, but also the islands, Samoa, Tonga, Vanuatu, you know, exotic places, PNG. And there's nothing like going to a remote village in you know, the back islands of Fiji, having a church conference with 600 people where 2 people in the whole congregation have got a cash-paying job. Everyone else is subsistence farmers. And you sort of think about, you know, we talk about schedules and clocks and time and organisation and structure, and they're thinking about, you know, where's the next meal coming from? And it's so humbling to see the love, the support, the faith, the competency, you know, the way that community works when you're involved in a project spending $600 million a month. You know, the comparison's enormous, but you realise these are incredibly valuable, wonderful people, and there's so much we can learn from them. And so that's been a huge blessing for me, just being able to I guess, have the luxury of living in 2 different worlds, and also saying, well, you know, what can I offer these incredibly good people, and trying to work that out. And so that's been that's one little thing.
You talk about them as 2 different worlds, but you manage to integrate them, it seems to me.
Well, you know, we're just all, I'd say we're all God's children, but, you know, we're all on the earth together, and we all have a part to play, and you really do recognise that. And, you know, and what we're doing is not necessarily better, it's just different.
It's just different,
And you kind of get that.
Thank you.
So one of the things that I had a real passion for, and it's kind of continued a bit, but it might have changed a little in Worley Parsons, but was that we didn't have a sales team and didn't see us as that. We saw ourselves as helping our customers be successful. And what we tried to do is get the people that had the most capability to help the customer actually visit with them, the technical people, the people that knew how to help with the problem. And now that's an obvious thing, but it's a massive differentiation as well. And so, you know, as a customer now, the last person you really want to see is a salesperson. What you want to see is someone that can help you and that can talk, you know, dirty, can talk about the problem and actually talk about solutions. And I think that's a really important concept. And so we used to say to all our lead people, they've got to get out and talk to customers. And certainly as a leader of the organisation, when I was out talking to customers, I'd say, I've got just the right person to come and see you and can help you, rather than say, you know, give us the job or let me help you. Yeah, we've got a deal. And just say, or we'd say something like, look, why don't we get a little team of our leaders together and have you come and, you know, we'll come to you or you can come to us and we'll just see if we can come up with any solutions together. And I know that you do that already, but try and get away from the concept of selling, even though it is. What you're trying to do is help your customer. And whether you're working for a company or providing a service provider, it's exactly the same thing. And it's all about how are you going to go the next step? What can you do that really adds value? And how much do you understand the problem to begin with, and then you can start working on a solution. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's certainly the approach we took. So one of the things is this I guess, Fortescue value that says never ever give up. And part of it is never ever give up on the goal, so the schedule and the cost. So if you figure out you're not going to achieve that, you know you've got to do something different. And just deciding that, just that mental state of saying we can't accept that it's just going to take longer and cost more. We've got no more money, and if we're not producing iron ore by the chosen end date, we're going to be in big trouble because we just borrowed $9 billion. And so it was that drove us to say we've got to come up with a solution. And so we sat down with the contractor and had a serious discussion, and came up with a solution that, ultimately we came up with together, as much as they weren't totally supportive, but understood, and it did work out. But I think it is that mindset that you've either got to keep that goal in mind and simply not let it change, or not. And I think we're able to do that. So we had a very flat structure, and we had the whole job divided and run by project engineers and project managers across the whole thing that had total empowerment, budget, schedule and confidence, could make decisions on the ground. It's essential. And we also measured ourselves. We said our turnaround time for questions, queries, challenges, problems, we measured. And we tried to get back the same day. Our average was, I think, about 7 or 8 hours across the whole project. So had a problem, had to solve it. Some things took as long as a week. Nothing took longer than that. But the average was really short, and we measured it. We said, if our contract is going to be high performance, we better be high performance too. And I think it does sound obvious, but you simply have to change that mindset. If you've got a hierarchy that says, it's going to go from the managing contractor and up through the system and back again for decisions, well, you're going to fail. No question. And we've got plenty of examples. And of course, those project managers and project engineers and project directors can ask for help. You're not saying you're on your own, but you have the responsibility to deliver. And you can call on anyone else, but that's where the buck stops. And we'd monitor performance and help those that needed help. Okay, great. I mean, I think it's probably take a while to explain, but relationships are everything. The team is always that's where all of the solutions, everything comes from that. And I guess working with people, trying to lift people's thinking, and I don't know if I've been good at that or not, but it's amazing if you can just get people above the problem to actually look down on it and say, what are we really trying to achieve here? It's incredible what people do. I have amazing faith in the ability of human beings, I guess, to come up with solutions and develop things. If you just get the thinking at a high enough level, get in the helicopter and have a look at it from a different perspective, and then build the vision of what has to be done. And the other thing is to paint a vision. So I think as leaders, if we can constantly be painting a vision of the next step, people can achieve it. But you've got to kind of paint it with a bit of colour so they get a feel for it. But you can do anything, really, if you just believe it's possible. From a faith perspective, it's, the proper name for the Mormon Church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It is an incredible organisation. It doesn't have any paid ministry, so all of the church members take all the leadership roles and you kind of move from, there's no progression. So you can be a Sunday school teacher one week and a leader like I am at the moment, but when I'm released from that, I'll be back to, whatever next. So that's great, but the biggest focus that the church has is on the value of family. And so my wife, my children, everything to me. And religious practice at home is simple things like praying together as a family on our knees every day and reading some scriptures together. Old-fashioned things, I guess you'd say. But developing faith together at home is a really key part. And that has been, again, such a blessing in my life. With all of the stuff going on, you could really get carried away with how exciting life is. It just brings you back to earth to focus on your family. I'm so blessed. I've got a beautiful wife. We've been married for 35 years. Got 4 children. They're all now married, which is unusual, I think, in the world today. We've got 8 grandchildren. They're the absolute treasure. They're the real blessing of life. So all the other stuff, when it comes to the end, really doesn't matter that much, but they really do matter. So I hope that gives something of a flavour. Absolutely. And, the original business plan was we could get to 20 people and be a process arm of the 50 people, Wallan Grill. And then we had a vision that we could go into Asia and we could take our oil and gas capability because the name was known. And so, that was the next step. And then we had a vision we could get to $400 million turnover. And I remember, we were desperate to how we're going to pay people in the next week. And I remember at the time, I think Fleur announced they'd made $5 million on a project. And I kind of looked at the $5 million and thought, if I had $5 million, I could actually employ people and we could do all kinds of stuff. But we didn't. We had, but one thing we did is we always had an incredibly challenging and impossible stretch target. So wherever we got to in Worley Parsons, we'd set the next goal. So when we set the 400 million turnover goal, I think we were turning over 20 million. And we said we'd do it in 5 years. And, you would have said they're smoking something, and we did it in 3.5. It was just, there were some amazing challenges, and it did show the power of that. That just having a stretch target and then getting people committed and part of that is an amazing thing. Very incredibly powerful.
It wasn't just having a stretch target. It was actually having the fundamental, unshakable belief that you could actually reach it.
Yeah, and the passion to go for it. So
well,
as well. It comes the belief and then be passionate and say, we're not going to leave any stone unturned in going for it. And I think in that service provider sense, it's also saying it's all about customers. So if you're not providing something useful, valuable, helpful to your customers, you're not going anywhere.
No.
All the time. What's the next thing they need? My life, I think, but the answer is no. And but you learn pretty fast when you're the general manager and you've only got you and your
virtual team.
And your virtual team. So you're writing the proposals, you're doing the payroll, you're preparing the accounts, you're writing the report and checking it and all that stuff. So it actually came pretty quickly. And then through the growth of the company, it was a real growing experience to just go through each of the phases. And probably that advisory board period was one of the fastest growth periods as we really faced up to what we didn't have and needed to have. And then going through a float and then mergers, acquisitions. It sort of came step by step. which was lots of fun. So I haven't done an MBA, but probably would have been not made quite as many mistakes if I had.
Then again, that's what you learnt from, right?
Exactly. Oh, exactly.
I'd be interested to hear some thoughts.
Yeah, so I travelled about 50% of the time and also had church responsibilities as well. So it was an incredible challenge, but my wife is amazing. I guess that's probably one of the absolute secrets to having a wonderful wife that's so supportive and helpful, and having a great relationship. So we're best friends and still are best friends. So that's been great. But we did a couple of things, and one of the most powerful was every year we took a month, 5 weeks or 4 weeks, and went somewhere with the kids. And we did that from 1995 when my youngest boy was 5 and the girls were 9, 11 and 13 or something. And that time was absolutely focused on them. A couple of phone calls maybe, but but early in the morning, so they didn't know. That added huge value. So even though we didn't have enormous amounts of time together all through the year, when we did, I think I tried to be present and have a relationship with each of my children, and especially with my wife. And then that 4 weeks away together, when we look back on that as a family, we remember all the places and all the things we did and all the funny stories, and it really has provided a long-lasting connection. And the final thing probably is just faith together, having a common set of beliefs, even though they're developed with the kids over time, has been another really strong connection. So I hope that answers the question a bit.
Once again, an innovative solution. Most people wouldn't have thought, well, if I can put in a month of really solid connection every year, that'll compensate. But it did, clearly, from your point of view.
It did, yeah. It was a real blessing.
Thank you. So I think we'll draw the questioning to a close. Peter, you've been characteristically generous and open, and really appreciated it. I enjoyed talking to you beforehand, as well as having the conversation here, and I think you'll agree, here's somebody where what you see is exactly what you get. And there's something absolutely congruent and solid about that, and it's been a real pleasure to listen to you. So thank you. Well, please join me.